Welcome to the Cedar Creek Bible in a Year podcast. Whether you are listening on your own, with a friend, or a group of friends, we hope this podcast helps you connect with Scripture and also enriches your relationship with God. Here are your hosts, Luke Shortridge and Andy Rechtenwald.
Hello everyone, welcome to Cedar Creek Radio. This is Luke Shortridge and Andy Rechtenwald, and also Eric talks sometimes too. Andy, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Eric?
Great.
That's it.
You just bypassed me.
That's it.
Okay, so today we're talking about the book of Joshua. We are moving out of the Torah, and Joshua is a fascinating character in the Bible. This book, I think, talks a lot about leadership. Also talks about conquering the land. The Israelites were coming into the promised land God was giving them. There's also a lot of violence in this book, if I'm just being completely honest.
Lots of it.
Talk about that a little bit. So my thought here was, let's talk about Joshua. Well, why talk about one Joshua when you can talk about dozens of them? Today we're going to play famous Joshua trivia.
Dang it.
There are many, many men named Joshua who have done great things and, are known sometimes for infamous reasons. So here's the deal. I'm going to describe a person. You're going to tell me
Their first name.
their last name. I will give a caveat. Some go by Josh. Some go by Joshua.
Okay.
But yeah.
Josh Brolin.
I don't know who that is.
An actor. Well, I got one right. Next question.
Famous baseball player who is currently the third baseman of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Josh Donaldson.
Bam! Nailed it! I thought you'd get that. Famous actor in Black Hawk Down, Pearl Harbor, and something called Lucky Number 11.
Oh. Yep. It's Josh something. I know who you're talking.
All of the ladies listening right now are screaming his name.
Josh
He's a heartthrob.
Hartnett.
Yes, you knew it! I don't know
Yes.
why that clue gave it to you.
I don't know.
But that worked out great. Okay, we'll stay in the acting realm. Famous actor who played Sawyer in Lost. Luke is still bitter about the last episode.
I've never seen Lost.
Wow.
Ever.
What? How have you never seen Lost?
I think it's going to be one
How
of those
are we
shows
friends?
that everybody says that to me about, and I just continue to be, kind of a turd and not watch it.
Okay. Well, here's what I'll tell you. The show was great.
That's what I've
It
heard.
was genius.
I'm like that with Seinfeld.
Me too.
Oh.
I'm the same way with
Sorry,
Seinfeld.
What do you mean by the same way with Seinfeld? You've never seen Seinfeld?
I've seen an
few
episode or two where
episodes.
people are like, Eric, you would love
What?
Seinfeld. I'm like, I'm not going to watch it.
Yep.
Eric!
It could be one of the best shows
Oh
ever.
my-
Never gonna watch it.
I mean, I
What
loved it.
is wrong with you
I love
people?
Seinfeld, but I'm just not going to go back and watch all 8 million episodes.
He is easily the worst part of the show. Everybody else around him is brilliant.
Well,
Well, his first
I have to
name's
take
not
your word
Josh,
for
so-
it. I'll have to take your word for it.
Gosh, I can't even.
That and Lost, that it's good.
I gotta pull together. Do you have an answer for us?
No.
Josh Holloway.
Never heard of him.
I don't know how I'm gonna continue to be pretend friends with you on the radio. Okay. Next, singer of "You Raised Me Up," Bro is sold 25
Josh
million.
Groban.
Okay, I didn't even get the clue
Doesn't
finished.
matter.
Okay, next.
I know Josh Groban.
Disgraced reality TV star of 19 Kids and Counting.
What's their name?
Josh is his first name.
Well,
They got 19 kids whose first name starts with a J.
I know. Josh. They were in the news for a bunch of bad things. Well, one of them was. The Josh, is that the one that's bad?
Yeah, that's the one.
Josh Duggar.
Bam! Nailed it!
Yes, gosh, my brain's working so well today.
You ever watch that show?
No. Should I?
It's not bad. It's pretty wholesome.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's...
Well,
okay.
Well,
moving on.
He did repent, if it means anything.
Then he got caught cheating on his wife after he repented.
He repented that too, I think. Okay, here we go. Lockdown NFL corner who doesn't like Odell Beckham Jr.
Oh, Josh. I do know this because they were fighting last year.
Yes.
A bunch.
Yes!
Is it to start with a T?
All right, you think about it. Let me tell you what happened. I had a fantasy football team that was doing great. I drafted Odell Beckham Jr. Things were swimming, they're going along fine. And then this game, this corner and Odell started fighting literally on the field and got ejected.
Yep.
Lost the week. What about me? How selfish of them.
I can't think of his last name.
Eric, you know it?
Plays for the Panthers, though.
Eric's not even
Or he
listening.
played for the Panthers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of
Guy
his
plays
last
for
name. Though.
Washington.
Didn't he play for the Panthers, though? What?
the Joshua.
Eric got it.
What's it?
Norman. I didn't
Norman.
think he was paying attention. Great job,
Shoot.
Eric. Okay, next. NFL coach who is credited with being the QB whisperer, most notably of Tom Brady. He also drafted Tim Tebow in the first round.
Hmm.
I went heavy sports on this trivia. Don't usually do that.
Josh.
Oh my gosh, Eric's giving signals. How is this happening?
I've only got.
Just
What is this? You guys have hand signals worked out? It's like, how long have you been cheating behind my back?
I think
This is
only
crazy.
two questions. Two.
how
of
many
them.
books are there in the Bible?
Are you Googling?
66.
Oh, how many episodes have we done?
Oh.
That'll give you the answer how many times we've
This is
cheated.
a ridiculous
That's not true.
conspiracy.
That would be amazing,
A
though.
lot of them, though.
There are a few times where I've
Andy,
cheated.
I thought you were an intelligent young man.
In some areas, yes. Heresy trivia, I did do that on my own.
Okay.
There's some others where I actually
All right.
I googled the answers while you were asking me.
Oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. If we
Okay,
don't have rules,
I did get.
then we are animals.
I got Josh Groban on my own.
We are monkeys throwing our poo at each
and
other.
I got Josh
The
Donaldson.
rules are important.
I got Donaldson and what was the other one? What's his name?
Duggar.
Groban, but I did not get Duggar.
Okay.
He was using a shovel.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, what was the question again? Oh,
NFL coach, QB whisperer, Tom Brady, Tebow first round.
Josh Coffee.
No.
He was pointing towards my coffee. I don't know.
Josh McDaniels.
Josh McDaniel. Oh, my coffee's from McDonald's. I get it now.
All right, next.
All right,
oh,
no,
Mick.
no
the
cheating.
Mick.
No cheating. Got
He
it.
can't
okay.
even pick up his cheating.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Next, drummer of 21 Pilots.
Why is
You know it or you don't?
No, I don't know it. I don't know it.
Eric, do you know
I
it?
don't know it either.
Josh Dunn. I thought maybe you know that because you're hip with the kids.
I'm not hip with the kids.
Okay.
I listen to country music and other things.
What? Country?
Yep.
Oh, all right. We're going to talk afterward. I'm going to carefront you about that.
Care from me.
Okay, next. Pretty boy actor of the Hunger Games, PETA, was fat in the book, but this guy was not. You have to know this.
I don't know his last name.
Josh Hutcherson.
Hutcherson.
I don't know his last name. I know his first name is Josh.
Next, part of Dawson's Creek Quartet also starred in The Mighty Ducks.
Oh.
Ducks Fly Together.
Yes, they do fly together.
Goes by Joshua, if that helps you at all.
Joshua. I can't remember. Joshua.
3 seconds.
I don't know. I got nothing. Sorry. Wait.
Here's another hint. I have a son with this name.
Jackson.
Bam!
Joshua Jackson.
Nailed it.
Got it.
See, you do know me.
Joshua Asa.
We- You had a 50% guess there.
Yep.
You know what's weird? There is an NFL player named Asa Jackson.
That is weird.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Nope.
But okay, next. Making his main stage teaching debut in 2017 at Cedar Creek Church in Toledo, Ohio, this Joshua is currently killing it.
Joshua Whitlow.
Bam! Wow. Great job, Andy.
You're welcome.
It's not that great, though, because he's world famous.
Mm.
Okay, this little known Joshua is a Cedar Creek finance whiz.
Brasi.
Wow.
Little known.
I cannot think of any more Joshes. We're done.
Okay.
You did pretty well.
I did okay.
Eric's cheating.
It hasn't been that many times.
It's tainted, bro.
There are a few times.
There's an asterisk right on this thing.
If we go back and okay, so the one I failed, obviously you didn't help me cheat. That book one, the old book one.
Yeah, I
classics,
remember.
I failed that one. The Disney trivia, all on my own.
Huh.
So
What was it musicals you were good at? Chick flicks? One of them.
honestly, it hasn't been that many times, but there are times it hasn't. If we go back, I can tell you which ones. If I listen to them, I can say, yeah, I definitely didn't know the answer to that one. And if I'm sitting there going, I don't. Oh, yeah, that's when I was cheating.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, great.
I didn't cheat on the Deuteronomy one either. What was the trivia on that?
Okay.
Oh, Creed trivia. There's no way you could have helped me.
We're just going to have to continue on, or I'm going to break down crying.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, Andy, what do you know about the book of Joshua?
I know that it's a very violent book.
Okay.
But
true.
I'll go through the actual notes. Again, these are taken from the ESV Study Bible. Purpose of the book of Joshua is to recount the events surrounding the conquest of Canaan, obviously with a pointing towards God, so it's very theological as to why these things happen. It's not clear who wrote the book of Joshua. Some have said Joshua, but the internal language doesn't fit with, and that's an actual conservative scholar view.
I
That doesn't
actually
fit.
agree with that
Yeah, it doesn't really fit with it being Joshua. And the dating of the way that some of the things are phrased. But the good news is the book doesn't claim that it's Joshua. So we're good there. Original audience were the Israelites. It's really hard to tell when the book was written, but it's most likely to be somewhere in the second millennia BC.
Okay.
So
It's kind of vague, but
yeah, the setting was the land of Canaan because they're taking it over, and if the listeners aren't aware, Canaan is mostly the western side of that area. I don't know what you would have called it back then, but that area.
yeah,
Right
like
where the
on
Sea of Galilee.
Mediterranean.
Yep, right on the edge of the Mediterranean. That would have been Canaan. And then the key people are really it's Joshua in the book of Joshua. I mean, there's some kings he runs into that he kills, but mostly it's just Joshua and the people. And there's some themes you're going to see throughout the book that the Lord is present and that the Lord is a warrior and a protector, that he is sovereign, and that is very necessary for the people of Israel to remove false gods from their midst. And here's how the book breaks down. So we'll talk about going into the land for the first 5 chapters. The next 6 or so, it's them actually taking the land, so it's the actual military part of it.
Yep.
After that, they spend about 7 chapters discussing how they divide the land amongst the people, and then finally, the last few chapters is all about serving God in the land.
Joshua is a fascinating character for me because he follows Moses,
Yep.
who's like, you have like God. Jesus would be on par with God. You have Abraham, who's the founder of the Jewish nation.
Mhm.
I'm going to say Moses is right below Ben.
Yep.
So, like, you're Joshua, you're taking over for Moses, and he was one of Moses' lieutenants, but if you're amazing and, like, the greatest leader in the history of the world, then you've essentially tied the guy that came before you.
Right.
So, good luck.
Good luck.
Yeah. I think it's a fascinating book. It is very violent. There is a lot of God telling Joshua to wipe out people that are there.
Yep.
So we'll get to that in a minute. I'd say that modern day people are very troubled by that, but I think we can give a little bit of explanation, maybe some context. You may not like it, but we can at least talk through it. So
Yep.
we're going to go ahead and jump into the book of Joshua now. If you have a paper Bible handy, you can pull that out. If you want to switch over to a Bible app, we're going to be in the New Living Translation. We're also going to have questions as we go along. If you're listening by yourself, you can journal on those questions, or you can just press pause and think about your answer before you continue on. If you're listening with a group of friends, maybe you're at a Bible study group, whatever, you can press pause and talk about the questions. Then we'll do our best to answer them as well. We're in Joshua 1 through 9. Let's jump in. After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving you. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on land I have given you, from the Negev wilderness to the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea, in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail or abandon you. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Kind of cool.
Yep. I think it's interesting. I always kind of a little bit laugh at this part because it's totally different than what we're used to. So the context is that Joshua knows he's taking in the Israelites to go conquer a bunch of different countries, essentially, in Canaan, or cities, I guess you'd call them. And but they operated more like countries. So he says to him, "Be strong, be very courageous," which you'd want to hear if you're going into like a battle like
Says
that.
it 3 times.
Yeah, then he goes, and make sure you read the Bible beforehand. That's like his thing. Like, we don't have, that's not like you don't see blacks walk down and you like, okay, now before you go in, be strong, courageous, train well, do us, and then read your Bible before you walk in. Like, then it doesn't happen.
Right.
But
Lock and load and study up.
yeah, right. So now, but he does, as we talked about in our episode on Deuteronomy, following the commands of God helps you in pretty much all areas of life. So that would obviously include military conquest.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how he prioritizes God giving instructions to Joshua. And this is a huge task that Joshua is undertaking. Moses had led the people for 40 years and really wasn't able to do this. It was partly because
Right.
of his sin, the people's sin. Part of it was doubting God. God said, go ahead and take the land, conquer it. And the people didn't. They complained. They wanted to go back to Egypt.
But Joshua's the right guy. He was one of the two that said, we can do this.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
So it is cool. Also, I will say, whenever you see something repeated in the Bible, that is emphasis, because there was no bold, there was no highlight, there was no change the font size.
Right.
A lot of times when the scriptures were, recorded, there was no spaces because paper was super expensive. No vowels even was written for the Hebrew text, and it was front and back. So they were maximizing paper usage as much as possible.
Right.
So the only way to really show emphasis that something is really important was to repeat it, which is why you'll see that sometimes, especially in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
All right, so Andy, our question here: when was the last time you experienced a leadership transition? Doesn't have to be you being the leader, but you saw or were part of a leadership transition. What happened?
Yeah, well, this one's kind of easy. I just transitioned over to South Toledo, so the campus pastor, Andy Fortney, stepped down, resigned. He's teaching in the public school system now, which is pretty cool. Mark Snyder stepped in and to be the campus pastor. And then Jason Smithers, who was the associate, he kind of had it like he didn't really fit in that position. He really wanted to go back in the arts department, and there was a good opportunity, and the church, our elders made a decision to to rotate four of us. So somebody from White House went to West, from West to Central, Central to South, and South to White House. And I was a part of that transition, and it's been exciting and fun, and it has been an interesting transition, but one of the more smooth ones I've been a part of for sure.
So talk a little bit then, because transition is hard and tough. People don't understand, and why can't we just go back to how things were?
Yeah.
How would you say walking into a scenario where maybe everybody's not on board, maybe people don't understand? How do you kind of coach people and help people through a tough transition?
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's tough, but I'm sure there was difficulties.
Oh yeah, we've already had a few people say that they're a very small amount of people say they're going to change campuses or whatever because they don't, for lack of a better term, they just feel like South has always been under kind of like a change of leadership constantly, and so they're getting tired of that. And so the only thing I've said, and I've repeated multiple times, is that the idea here was not that they wanted to promote somebody or that they just felt like it was time for a change, but that everybody that was in the spot that left their spot was because they didn't feel like their gifts were being used there. That they weren't being, when you're in your sweet spot, like you just can feel it. It's very obvious. And Jason Smithers would say, he would be very open in admitting that he wasn't I've had several people come up to me and say, I love Smithers. I could just tell that he really wanted to be on that stage. Like that was what he wanted to be with the band, and it's just different. And so like that's what I've been telling people is like when there is a transition that makes sense, the majority of the people involved in it don't really question it. They're like, yeah, that makes so much more sense now. Sometimes it's not the case, though. Sometimes the transitions are very hard, but we've been blessed. Mark and I, in particular, have been blessed to be able to really slide into those positions and kind of hit the ground running. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, as a church leadership team, obviously we went through a pretty big transition from Lee Poller, founding pastor, to Ben Snyder.
Worst transition ever, right?
Oh, come on. Truthfully, when we talk with other church experts, it's scary how good it went. And I think that's a credit to those two individuals. Both stepped up and just have led in amazing ways. But we went through a book by William Bridges called Managing Transition. It was super helpful, super good. And he talks actually in there about the Israelites and how they continually wanted to go back to Egypt, back to the old way, and they're going through this period of change. And he kind of maps it out. It goes through stages. This is not a Christian book, by the way, but it just kind of is a business leadership type book. But he talked about the neutral zone, which is the time in the middle, which is that nebulous, we're not where we were, but we're not where we're going to be at. It's that time in between. And he said it's actually super valuable and super helpful for a company because ideas that previously would never have worked because people are like, no, why would we do that? Things are great. We're not going to change. We're not going to change the status quo. And once a new leader gets established, again, people get set in their ways. But that neutral zone, that time in between, people are willing to try anything because they're like, yeah, there's so much change happening. Let's go for it. And he said some of the best ideas and the most inventive strategies happen in the neutral zone, and what
Yeah.
can be seen as difficult. He talks about how change is immediate, but transition is mental, and transition takes time. That can actually be a huge positive
Sure.
if you look at it in the right light.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for
Yeah.
getting personal with us. It's great. Praying for you, man. You're doing great. Keep it up.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Joshua 2, 1 through 4. This is the story of Rahab and the spies. You want to take that for us, Andy?
Yep. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. But someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the land. Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I don't know where they were from. I didn't know where they were from.
So this story is pretty long. I just kind of condensed here.
Yep.
Lots going on here, but basically the spies hide successfully. They make a deal with Rahab. She tells them that the people are all afraid of the Israelites within the city. She acknowledges that their God will help them be successful.
Yep.
And she has a plan to help them escape. So we'll jump to verse 17.
Before they left, the men told her, we will be bound by the oath we have taken only if you follow these instructions. When we come into the land, you must leave this scarlet rope hanging from the window through which you let us down. And all your family members, your father, mother, brothers, and all your relatives must be here inside the house. If they go out into the street and are killed, it will not be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside this house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. If you betray us, however, we are not bound by this oath in any way. I accept your terms, she replied, and she sent them on their way, leaving the scarlet rope hanging from the window. The spies went up into the hill country and stayed there for 3 days. The men who were chasing them searched everywhere along the road, but they finally returned without success. Then the 2 spies came down from the hill country, crossed the Jordan River, and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. The Lord has given us the whole land, they said, for all the people in the land are terrified of us.
All right. So this is very, very fascinating to me, what's going on.
Yeah.
So this is one place in the Bible, to me, that is a little troubling. Because Rahab lies. I mean, she's purposely deceitful.
Yep.
I mean, straight up lies. And that saves the life of these Israelites. And also, the Bible talks a lot about not bearing false witness.
Yep.
It seems to talk about the downside of lying, but in this case, she lies, she is spared, the spies are spared. And later, in the book of Hebrews, she is referenced in the Hall of Heroes.
Yep.
The members of great faith.
Yep.
So my question, Andy, is does God ever condone lying? And then in this vein, would you steal food to save your starving child?
I
Why or why not?
love these questions.
Moral dilemma,
I'm super
baby.
excited about the book of Joshua because of these types of questions. So, moral philosophers, specifically Christian ones, would delineate between objective morality and absolute morality.
All right,
So,
you have to explain your terms.
Yep. Objective essentially just means it is without opinion. It is something that, for instance, I can say that is vanilla ice cream, and that would be a fact. But if I say, let's say, I'd be an objective fact. I like vanilla ice cream is a subjective fact. It's based upon, it's a subjective thing. It's about me. It's based on the subject, right?
Okay.
So an objective moral value would be something like murder is wrong.
So this is wrong all the time, no
Yep.
matter what.
Yeah, an objective fact would just say murder is wrong. That thing is not good. And then but that's objective morality. Absolute morality is that no matter what, at any chance or any time, whatever, lying is wrong. So you would say lying is wrong as an objective moral value, but an absolute moral value would say you can never lie and that be a good thing. God would never condone that. Which moral philosophers would say kind of pigeonholes God, because clearly what Rahab did here is celebrated throughout the New Testament.
Yeah.
So clearly she didn't do anything wrong, but then we have to answer the question, so is it okay that she lied? God would say here, it's an objective moral value that you shouldn't lie, but it's not an absolute moral value in the sense that if a guy walks into your house and says, where are your kids? I'm going to kill him. You don't say, well, God wouldn't want me to lie here. They're upstairs, right? And, do that. Instead you would lie and say, I don't have any, they're not here. So God is infinitely wise in his assessment of morality, and in that can permit or say that lying is okay in specific instances. It does get dangerous, though, because then you play the game of, can I lie in this instance? And protecting life, obviously, is a value God holds higher
Right.
than... so not all sins are equal. Murder is definitely more heinous to God than lying. If you read the New Testament ethic.
Whew, all right, I'm struggling here.
Uh-huh.
I am. I mean, I'm just torn. I grew up in a kind of fundamentalist setting where things are very black and white. The world was right and wrong. I also have a very high belief.
Sure.
I know the world operates in gray, not in black and white.
Yep.
I get that. I've seen it. I've hurt people with being kind of legalistic and fundamentalist. So I understand totally the downfalls of that, legalism being applying the law without love. But man, I hate untruthfulness. I hate deceitfulness. And I see how it worked here. And I see that it was exactly the thing that God called her to do. And she's praised for it by Scripture.
Right.
So it's tough for me.
Yep.
It is.
I think that's why this question is so interesting, because it seems like it's almost like a slippery slope. Well, if you permit lying for this instance, then when else is it okay?
Right.
If it's not that big of a deal. Well, it's not to say that lying isn't a big deal, but when you're at a moral dilemma, God does weight certain sins as more heinous in a sense. So in order for the Israelites to live, because God values life over a lie, He permitted her lying, and even I hate you, but it's true. Celebrated it in the Hall of Faith in that chapter 11 of Hebrews.
Yeah.
She celebrated for it. Yeah, Eric.
Well, question. So as I'm thinking about this, would you say that, I guess all sin is sin, but there are different consequences to different sins.
Oh, yeah.
Which not necessarily makes it like one sin is worse than the other, as in like if you have to choose, go ahead and choose lying as opposed to murder, but in fact that
Right.
there are different consequences for different
Oh,
sins.
yeah.
I agree.
Yep.
So sin is wrong, is wrong, is wrong, is wrong.
Yep.
100% of the time.
Well,
but the
we're
consequence
equally-
for lying is different than the
Yes.
consequence for murder.
Totally
Yep.
agree. And I would say we, like in the Catholic faith, they believe in mortal sins, venial sins. You know, these sins aren't quite so bad. They won't really send you to hell. I believe all sins are mortal sins. I think if you sin one time, you are destined for hell.
Yep.
You now have a sin problem. What are you going to do with it? So it's equal in that respect, but to Eric's point, it's definitely not in consequences. And it does come down to what's the greatest value.
Yep.
Well, and so then the thing is like, thinking from the New Testament ethic, if I, in this case, like Andy's case, if I lied to save my family, or, like when your wife is pregnant, she goes, hey, does this make me look fat? No.
God told me to
no,
tell
you
the
look-
truth.
You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Or when your wife's looking at you going like, have I put on some weight? And
Right,
she's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
no, you look
so
great.
But I mean, in your mind,
Guys,
going, okay, so
you can ask my wife. I usually tell the truth.
oh boy.
I do.
Anyway, okay, so
It's
we'll go
terrible.
back to Andy's example.
Pray for me.
If you lie to save your kids, the repentance of that afterwards is, God, I know I shouldn't have lied in that situation. That consequence is a lot easier to repent of and move on from
Sure.
than if you murdered someone. That series of repentance and regeneration takes a lot longer
Yep.
to be able to.
We talk about murder. There are more people slaughtered in the book of Joshua than any other book.
Again, that's the thing, is like, thou shalt not kill. And it says murder, but they're God calls for, and we'll get into it, I'm guessing, God calls for the slaughter of combatants and non-combatants in the book of Joshua. So clearly there is a God. It's not that God is capricious, or it's not that God is very like,
Talking to both sides of his mouth.
yeah, he's not saying like, well, you can't kill unless I say you can kill. That's not what's going on. But there is obviously
The
a
highest
balance.
value is that God praises human life.
Yep.
But
And-
But-
but I'm sure that's coming up.
all right,
We'll get there.
We'll table it. Joshua 5:13 through 15. This is a crazy passage. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and he saw a man standing in front of him with a sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you friend or foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I am the commander of the Lord's army." At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. "I am at your command," Joshua said. "What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." And Joshua did as he was told.
Mm-hmm.
Whew.
Yep.
So my question is, when was the last time you swore loudly? Just kidding. I can only imagine what Joshua was saying and thinking when this
Right.
happens. It's so telling. The answer here is, I'm not friend or foe. I'm not for you as a human, as a man. And this was an angel, I believe. Not just an angel, commander of the Lord's army. A pretty important angel.
Yep.
So our question here is, what does this story tell us about the nature and character of God and his angels? How do you love a God that is also to be feared?
Yeah, I've always loved this passage. because I do believe it potentially is an angel. I also believe it could be a theophany.
Whoa!
Because, and here's
Here's
my
We
reasoning.
need a theophany alarm. Ding 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 ding.
Here's my reasoning. The only other place in Scripture that the words "take off your sandals, for the place you're standing is holy" is in
Yeah, Exodus.
Exodus, when Moses meets the Lord in the form of a theophany, a burning bush. So I would say
That's
like
the theophany alarm.
yeah, that's the one of my professors at Biola would say when anybody said something weird, he would go like meow meow. That's heresy. The heresy alarm. He even interrupted another guy's lecture. He just walked by and he goes, "Oh, Dr. Lewis, what are you doing?" He goes, "I'm just checking to see my heresy meter's going off. I just want to make sure that nothing's going on." So I think it's a theophany,
it's getting a little-
but I think even if it is, even if it isn't, if it's an angel, whatever, I think the nature of God and His angel, let's just say it's an angel for the question,
Sure.
is that the angels do the Lord's bidding. I mean, they are His angels do what He tells them to, and there's no question. Like after the fall, I guess there's no question in the actual angels that when God tells them to do something, it's not because of their love for humanity necessarily. It's because of their love for God.
Well, and I think angels are a lot smarter than us.
Yep.
They've been around a lot longer, and they've seen the nature of men and people.
Yep.
And they know I'm not for you 100% because your heart may waver, which is crazy. So I would say, I have struggled with this a little bit as well. Gosh, Joshua is such a perplexing book. We are to love God, but we are also called to fear Him. And that is difficult because sometimes I feel like, God, he loves us, He cares for us, His mercies are new every day, which is true. But we are to revere Him because He is absolutely powerful and He is absolutely terrifying when you think about His wrath.
But that's, and I think we brought it up here in other episodes, but that's why I love C.S. Lewis's line when he talks line Witch in the Wardrobe.
Yes.
When
Yep.
the beavers,
yeah.
kids are asking the beavers and says, it's Aslan who's supposed to be Jesus. Is he safe? And they said, no, of course he's not safe. He's a lion,
Right.
He's taken as a lion in the movie. He says he's not safe, but he is good. And so the difference of going
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, is Jesus going to be cuddly and all about me and everything like that? It's like, no, but he is good. He's just.
Yeah,
He's good
right,
and
Yep.
just.
Yeah, I love that line.
Good stuff. All right. Andy, let's go to Joshua 6. We're going to talk about the fall of Jericho. We're going to read the whole part here. Do you want to take it for us, 1 through 27?
Here we go.
You got it.
Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go out or in. But the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day you are to march around the town 7 times with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priests give one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse and the people can charge straight into the town. So Joshua called together the priests and said, Take up the ark of the Lord's covenant and assign 7 priests to walk in front of it, each carrying a ram's horn. Then he gave orders to the people, March around the town, and the armed men will lead the way in front of the ark of the Lord. After Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests with the ram's horns started marching in the presence of the Lord, blowing the horns as they marched. And the ark of the Lord's covenant followed behind them. Some of the armed men marched in front of the priests with the horns, and some behind the ark with the priests continually blowing the horns. Do not shout, do not even talk, Joshua commanded, not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout. Then shout. So the ark of the Lord was carried around the town once that day, and then everyone returned to spend the night in the camp. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests again carried the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests with the ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing their horns. Again, the armed men marched both in front of the priests with the horns and behind the ark of the Lord. All this time the priests were blowing their horns. On the 2nd day they again marched around the town once and returned to the camp. They followed this pattern for 6 days. On the 7th day the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town as they had done before. But this time they went around the town 7 times. The 7th time around, as the priests sounded the long blast on their horns, Joshua commanded the people, Shout, for the Lord has given you the town. Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and the others in her house will be spared, for she protected our spies. Do not take any of the things set apart for destruction, or you yourselves will be completely destroyed, and you will bring trouble on the camp of Israel. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought into his treasury. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horns, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it with their swords, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the 2 spies, "Keep your promise, go to the prostitute's house and bring her out along with all her family." The men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, brothers, and all the other relatives who were with her. They moved her whole family to a safe place near the camp of Israel. Then the Israelites burned the town and everything in it. Only the things made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron were kept for the treasury of the Lord's house. So Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were with her in the house, because she had hidden the spies Joshua sent to Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites to this day. At that time Joshua invoked this curse: "May the curse of the Lord fall on anyone who tries to rebuild the town of Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son he will lay its foundation. At the cost of his youngest son he will set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his reputation spread throughout the land.
All right, we're going to jump right into it. Question: does it bother you that God told Joshua to wipe out the foreign inhabitants of this land? How do you reconcile a loving God with one that condones violence? $1 million question.
Yep. We had a whole semester on this topic.
Wow, right on.
Yeah.
All right, let me give you some of my thoughts
Yeah,
first.
go ahead.
First off, I will say it does bother me. It's tough.
Mhm.
It is brutal. I mean, God is calling for the genocide of a people. He says, kill everybody, young, old, kill their animals, burn and destroy everything except for precious metals. I believe here the greatest value, and Andy, you can disagree with me if you want, is the eradication of idol worship. So these were people who did not follow God, and they had wholeheartedly embraced idols. God's wrath, and guys, we can't forget this, God's wrath is set against anyone who does not accept him. And if we don't need a Savior, then Jesus really didn't need to come. But we need a Savior because God is righteous, He is just, He is right, and He will completely destroy and annihilate people that stand against Him. And it should make us uncomfortable. It should bother us. I think that it should convince us to work for God and to do His work and His will, because time is short, and because those who have not received the gospel are perishing.
Yeah.
I can theologically understand that, but it still bothers me
yeah.
on a human level. And the book of Joshua is a tough book to read, truthfully.
I agree. Yeah, well, I think the last thing you said, I think it'd be tough for anybody that loves Jesus to read this and think, and not have a little bit of a difficulty with it, an emotional difficulty, spiritual difficulty. I think that points to the reality of how heinous sin actually is. So we are disgusted by this. We're disgusted by in our words, the murder or even the genocide of these people. And why are we disgusted? Because we think it's wrong. Well, this had to happen according to Joshua because of the sin of the people. So there's two real predominant views as it relates to the Canaanite conquest.
Okay.
As to why it was okay. Because obviously it's God called for it. So whatever it was, God condoned it. Number one of the chief proponents of it is Paul Copan, who wrote a book called Is God a Moral Monster? And that's what he talks about in that book. He does a couple chapters on this topic.
Okay.
His view is that God actually did not call for the slaughter of women, children, and non-combatants. Instead, this was military language that was common in the ancient Near East, where they said destroy everything, but ultimately they didn't. And his evidence he uses is further along in the scriptures. You see that there's plenty of Canaanites, children, and women that are still alive because they intermarry and all these things happen. So his opinion.
What do you do for verse 21? They completely destroyed everything in it with their swords, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys.
So what Paul Copan would say is, again, that's exaggeration. That it's exaggeration on the part of what they would do a lot of times in the ancient Near East is exaggerate the war records. So this completely destroy means that they conquered. And they put in their men and women combatants. They would say if there were women combatants, people that would not leave the town, that the ultimate goal was to push them out of the town, not to kill. That's Paul Copan's view.
So verse 21 says they completely destroyed with swords.
He would say it's exaggeration.
All
the
right.
people. So if
Whoop,
the
whoop,
yeah
whoop.
if the heresy if the men or if the women stayed there and refused to leave, they would kill them. Is what he said that they were forced to. The other view is by one of my professors. They call him Dr. Evil because he studies genocide.
Wow.
That's his thing. His name is Clay Jones.
Sounds like a nice guy.
He's actually really incredible. Takes his students out every semester to IHOP. He's a really cool dude. His name is Clay Jones. He's got a website called clayjones.net where he deals with this topic, I think, in 7 different blogs.
Dang.
So this is his thing. He researches this a lot. And he says, no, it's exactly what it says, that they killed men, women, and children. And the reason why is because if you study what the Canaanites did, the children being trained up into that culture would have never assimilated into Israelite culture. Instead, they would have continued their things of child sacrifice, of rape, of actually sleeping with animals, like all that. And he goes through all of it and how atrocious the culture was. So he said the women weren't innocent. And he said the problem is when people like, and he attacks Paul Copan, he says when people like Paul Copan try to make it seem better than what it is, you're reducing how angry God actually is at sin, specifically at the worship of other gods, and he takes a very literalist interpretation of it, and because of his research on genocide. So he would say a lot of people today condone the use of the atomic bomb in to end World War II,
Sure.
but we destroyed men, women, and children when we used that thing.
Right.
So I know a lot of Christians now that don't condone it, but his thing is essentially like when you study genocide, people are evil, and so therefore it doesn't matter if you're a child, woman, or a man. God called for the murder of it or the killing of it.
I
Because
think
he's
in
God.
general we tend to underestimate how sinful we are, and we also underestimate how holy God is and how
Yep.
much He hates sin.
And that's you would fit in line with Clay Jones for
Yeah,
sure.
that's
Yep.
but
Well,
that's-
I think I would go back to the consequences thing, because I think there are several times in the Bible where there are things that are mentioned, and even they're not overtly celebrated. Like it didn't say, God smelled in the aroma of the burning, rotting corpses of the
Right.
women and children,
And he
was
loved
pleased.
it. Yeah.
It didn't say that. Just
animal
like-
sacrifice though.
Yeah, he does
animal
love that.
sacrifice,
Yeah.
Sure, but I mean like that, but not in something that we consider sin. Like, isn't it
Right.
a sin to kill? Whatever. But like that doesn't absolve any sort of consequences, whether
Mm-hmm.
they're eternal or physical, because you can't imagine. I mean, your dad was in the military. You talk to anybody else who's in the military who's seen war, who's seen
Yep.
death
Yeah.
happen. You go, yeah, even if it wasn't morally, sinfully wrong by God, that doesn't mean that there still weren't natural consequences
Oh,
for
yeah.
you mentally and physically. So we can look back and go, oh, well, God thinks that's great, so I should just go. No, there's still problems associated
Yep.
with, there's still natural consequences that happen with it.
And that's a big critique from people who don't enjoy the book of Joshua, specifically like atheists or other people of other faiths. They would say that think even about what isn't talked about, how this would have affected the Israelites who had to go and kill men, women, and children, how that would have negatively affected their psyche. And that's another big piece of studying. But I think I tend to align more with Clay Jones on this, only because I think it aligns more with the idea of God being a wrathful God. And nowadays we want to kind of dismiss that from it. And this is, it seems with it, I mean, he flooded the earth too.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's not easy, but it's not easy to understand God's holiness.
Not to mention when you study and look at Revelation and you look at the coming wrath that's coming, it's going to be horrible.
Yep.
I mean, it's very easy to want God to be safe, to want God to be peaceful and loving, and why can't you just snap your fingers and make sin go away?
Yep.
But because God is just and right, and He's right every time, He cannot tolerate sin. He cannot have any sin among Him. He does not wink at sin. He doesn't shrug at sin. He eradicates it.
And because his specific presence in the form of the tabernacle was going into Canaan, I mean, it had to be a complete destruction because it was different than it is now.
Yeah, and by the way, if you went into the temple and you were just negligent, not even opposing God, just negligent, you died instantly.
Yep.
And I've heard people say, like, why is the God of the Old Testament so different than the God of the New Testament? I see the same judgment in the
Revelation.
New Testament.
Revelation.
Right.
Yeah.
So
It's all there.
It's all there. It is troubling. It should be troubling to you. But I think that God does ultimately have a better plan, and that's why He sent Christ.
I agree.
Because the day will come where sin is defeated once and for all. And only when you know that is the end that we are moving toward do passages like this truly start to make sense. You may not like it, but you can at least start to understand it.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Man, this was a tough one.
Yes, it was.
Moral conundrums left and right. I would say, guys, go ahead, read Joshua on your own. There's a lot here to study. There's a lot to look at. Maybe you come out where we are on this topic. Maybe you're totally in a different boat. But Joshua, love him, hate him, he was an amazing follow-up to Moses. He served faithfully his entire life. And I'll just leave you with one last passage here. Joshua 24, 14 through 15. So fear the Lord and serve Him wholeheartedly. Put away forever the idols your ancestors worshipped when they lived beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt. Serve the Lord alone. But if you refuse to serve the Lord, then choose today whom you will serve. Would you prefer the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or will it be the gods of the Amorites in the land whom you now live? But as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord.
Great. I love it.
Yeah, again, some of the language may seem kind of archaic, but it's still the same question we have to ask today. Who do you choose to serve?
Yep. That's what it is. And that was the whole point. I mean, when you read, we talked about Deuteronomy and Joshua, it's always serve the Lord first, and it's better for you on this earth and obviously in the next life.
Cool. All right. Well, if you want to get a hold of us, we would love to interact with you. We are on Facebook. You can friend request us, Andy Rechtenwald or Luke Shortridge. You can also search for Eric Williams, but there are so many Eric Williams out there. Good luck finding the right one.
Yeah.
You can also email us, podcast@cedarcreek.tv. We get a lot of emails. Appreciate those. Keep those coming.
Lots of them.
Also, we are on Twitter,
Yep.
Twitter.
The Twitter.
So you can find us on there. Same thing, at Andy Rechtenwald, at Luke Shortridge. And we love hearing from you guys. If you have any feedback for us, you can just send that to us. If you like the podcast and you want other people to find it, you can share on social media. That always helps. You can also rate us in the iTunes store. That helps a lot. And, if your friend doesn't have an Apple phone or whatever, send them to our app, Cedar Creek app. Cedar Creek Radio's
Wherever you
right
get
on there.
apps.
Yeah, wherever you get apps, look for cedarcreek.tv. And rate us in that app store too, that helps. So that's it. All right, now you have your to-do list. Andy, what's next for us?
We are going to,
The Book of Judges.
and then, Judges.
All right. Thanks, Andy.
Yep.
Bye, guys.
See ya.